Hey everyone, welcome back to Canadian Insights. So imagine finding out that your neighbors have been planning to build a highway through your backyard, and the only reason you discovered this is because someone accidentally mentioned it at a barbecue you weren't even invited to. Well, that's essentially what just happened to BC Premier David Eby, except replace backyard with the entire north coast of British Columbia and highway with a massive oil pipeline. And folks, Eby is not happy. In fact, he's so unhappy that he basically went on national television to call out his fellow premiers for having secret chats about BC's coastline without bothering to include, BC. Grab your popcorn, because this interprovincial drama is serving up more tension than a family dinner where someone brings up politics, and we're breaking down every juicy detail. Let's kick things off with the bombshell that started this whole mess. This week, a senior government official spilled the tea to CBC's Parliamentary Bureau, revealing that the federal government and Alberta have been cozying up to sign a memorandum of understanding about a new pipeline. Not just any pipeline, mind you, but one that would stretch all the way to British Columbia's north coast and open up tanker traffic in those waters. Now, pipelines in BC are about as politically explosive as it gets. We're talking about a province where pipeline projects have sparked protests, legal battles, and enough political controversy to fill a Netflix limited series. So you'd think that any discussion about a new pipeline touching BC territory would definitely include, the actual Premier of British Columbia? Apparently not. Because Eby claims he was completely blindsided by these discussions, which is like planning someone's surprise party except forgetting to actually invite them at the end. Now here's where it gets absolutely wild. During an interview on CBC's Power and Politics, Eby dropped what might be the most dramatic soundbite of the week. He said he almost fell out of his seat when he heard Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe casually mention that he was part of these conversations. Picture that for a second. You're sitting there, probably sipping your morning coffee, watching the news, and suddenly you hear that premiers from other provinces have been having secret meetings about your province's coastline. The sheer audacity. It's like your siblings planning your birthday without you and then acting surprised when you're upset about being left out. Except instead of birthday cake, we're talking about potentially billions of dollars in infrastructure and massive environmental implications that could reshape BC's coastal economy and ecosystem for generations. But let's unpack why this isn't just regular political drama. This is next level because we're talking about BC's north coast, which is environmentally sensitive, culturally significant, and home to numerous First Nations communities who have very strong opinions about what happens on their traditional territories. Eby pointed out something crucial here that everyone needs to understand. These secret pipeline talks risk destabilizing First Nations support for major projects across the board. And that's not just political spin, that's actually a legitimate concern. Over the past decade, BC has worked incredibly hard to build consultation processes and relationships with Indigenous communities around resource development. It's been messy, it's been complicated, but there's been progress. The whole system relies on transparency, consultation, and respect for Indigenous rights and title. So when you've got premiers from Saskatchewan and Alberta, plus the federal government, apparently cooking up plans for BC's coastline without properly involving BC or the First Nations whose territories would be affected, you're not just breaking protocol, you're potentially blowing up years of relationship building. Here's what makes this situation extra spicy. Scott Moe, the Saskatchewan Premier who Eby called out, has been pushing hard for better market access for Saskatchewan's resources. That's his job, and honestly, you can't blame him for advocating for his province's economic interests. But here's the thing, Saskatchewan is landlocked. They don't have coastline. So when Moe is participating in conversations about pipeline routes through BC, he's essentially planning renovations in someone else's house. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is also in these talks, which makes slightly more sense since Alberta actually shares a border with BC and has enormous stakes in getting their oil to markets. But even Smith should know that you can't just have backroom discussions about BC infrastructure without BC at the table. It's not just rude, it's practically begging for the kind of political firestorm we're watching unfold right now. Let's talk about the federal government's role in all this, because Ottawa is right in the middle of this mess. The fact that federal officials were apparently close to signing a memorandum of understanding without BC's involvement is genuinely baffling. The federal government has jurisdiction over interprovincial infrastructure, sure, but they also have a constitutional duty to consult with provinces and First Nations. You can't just negotiate major infrastructure deals in secret and expect everyone to be cool with it when the news leaks out. It's like planning a group vacation and booking everything before asking if anyone can actually go. The Trudeau government, which has repeatedly emphasized its commitment to reconciliation and Indigenous consultation, now finds itself in the awkward position of explaining how they were part of discussions about a pipeline through BC without apparently giving BC or affected First Nations a proper heads up. Now here's the broader context that makes this whole situation even more complicated. BC has been absolutely torched over the past few years with pipeline controversies. We had the Trans Mountain expansion, which took forever to build and caused massive political headaches. We had Coastal GasLink, which sparked protests and blockades. The province has been trying to balance economic development with environmental protection and Indigenous rights, and it's been like trying to juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle. Every pipeline discussion in BC is automatically controversial because there are legitimate concerns about oil spills, environmental damage, impacts on marine life, and whether we should even be building new fossil fuel infrastructure in an era of climate change. So for other provinces and the federal government to apparently be having secret conversations about yet another pipeline is like poking a very tired, very grumpy bear that really just wants everyone to follow the proper consultation processes. Eby's frustration is pretty understandable when you consider what's at stake here. If First Nations communities feel like they're being cut out of major decisions affecting their territories, that doesn't just affect one pipeline project. It affects everything. It undermines trust in the entire system of consultation and accommodation that's supposed to guide resource development in BC. And when that trust breaks down, you get blockades, court challenges, and projects that drag on for years or never get built at all. The economic consequences of destabilizing First Nations support could be enormous, affecting not just pipelines but mines, LNG projects, forestry operations, and basically every major resource development in the province. So yeah, Eby has good reason to be calling this out. What makes this whole saga particularly Canadian is that we're watching premiers from different provinces publicly feuding over resource development while the federal government awkwardly tries to play referee. It's interprovincial drama at its finest, complete with competing economic interests, constitutional questions, and enough political finger-pointing to go around. And somewhere in all this, you've got First Nations leaders watching these premiers squabble and probably thinking, maybe you should have included us in these secret talks from the beginning. The big question now is where this goes from here. Does Ottawa actually sign this memorandum of understanding with Alberta, or do they pump the brakes and bring BC to the table? Do First Nations communities get proper consultation, or are we headed for another round of legal challenges and protests? And can someone please explain to Saskatchewan's Premier that maybe, just maybe, you should invite the host province to discussions about infrastructure on their own territory? If you're enjoying our deep dives into the messiest corners of Canadian politics, hit that subscribe button and join the Canadian Insights community where we break down multiple stories every single day. Drop a comment telling me whether you think these pipeline talks were genuinely secret or if BC should have been paying closer attention. And smash that like button if you appreciate us making sense of political drama that's more complicated than it needs to be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll probably be covering whatever political chaos erupts next.